Teachers are leaving the classroom. And this is a topic that all three of us felt very strongly about because it will impact our society and have a ripple effect for decades. So we thank the authors of the Chalkbeat article that we're highlighting tonight. The title of the Chalkbeat article is "The Teachers Who Are Not Coming Back to School This Year." And for those of you that don't know, Chalkbeat is a nonprofit news organization that covers public education in communities across America. So how do you get in touch with Chalkbeat? Go to their website and sign up for their newsletters. They have excellent, excellent reporting. And we're very honored today to discuss their article that was published at the beginning of this year in September. Okay, the beginning of the school year. Faith.
So one thing that struck me about this article is very few people mentioned that they were leaving because of kids. If anything, most of them said that they really loved working with the children. And it was all the other things having to do with teaching that was just getting to be too much, where they just had it. And one point that really stuck with me was the idea of the lack of respect that teachers get, whether it's from the community, from administrators. They felt, undervalued and not appreciated. So I really think that's something that has been going on for a while before the pandemic. I don't think the pandemic caused a lack of respect, but certainly everything seemed to hit a peak with the pandemic. And I think that's what we need to look at today. Like, what were some of the problems that happened really before that were problems all along? And then what did the pandemic seem to exacerbate along the way? So Judy, would you like to jump in?
Sure. So I think, the pandemic was like that breaking point for a lot of people. During the pandemic, you guys are great. You guys are heroes. You guys are like first responders. You guys are amazing. And, a lot of us teachers, we were there every single day in person during that pandemic. It was a crazy time, but you know what? Now the pandemic is dying down. And like the article said, teachers don't get that much positive feedback. One person in that article was like,
yeah,
they made it feel like we suck. Teachers suck. Yeah. How do we have this important role? Like, teachers are taking care of sometimes 28 kids in a class, 30 kids in a class. We're with them more than the parents are with them. Where's the appreciation?
And I guess what I'd also like to focus on during our discussion is the missed opportunities that educators had during the pandemic, especially school leadership. Because during the pandemic, we could have addressed some of the problems, the pre-pandemic problems that have been plaguing education, and that didn't happen. So some of the teachers in the article, what appealed to the three of us is that the authors of Chalkbeat talked to more than 80 teachers, most of whom are veteran teachers. And that was so alarming to me. Teachers with 25, 15 years of experience who honestly can't take it anymore, but also new, young, novice teachers who think that they can't slog it out for 2 or 3 decades as we did.
Yeah, what's interesting is, forever, the teachers who taught for 5 years, if they could make it through 5 years, usually they would stick around. Now we're seeing that it really is across the board where people are just looking to just take off. Even if they have many years in the system, they will not get their pensions or not get as much of a pension, and they're willing to give that up because they feel that they just can't hack it. They just cannot do it. And I just want to bring up a point, Mary, that you said about that there was a missed opportunity. I would agree, because if you really take a look at what's going on, it's not just the teachers leaving, but parents are opting out of the system. And they're saying more than ever, we're going to homeschool. Now that we did this during the pandemic, you know what? I'm doing a better job than what they're getting in school. And so now think about that. When there are so many kids who are not getting what they need in the school system, that parents without a teaching degree are getting the job done. So I would think that would be a red flag for schools and say, hey, maybe it's time we started to rethink the structure. Maybe we need to do things a little bit differently. Maybe we need to be a little more flexible. Maybe we have to start looking at the programs that we have and see if everything is really necessary, or, we're spending time on things that we shouldn't be spending time on. So I completely agree, but I do think we need to factor in that it's not just teachers leaving, that parents are pulling their kids out more than ever. Used to be homeschooling was just an option if you felt strongly about your religious beliefs. But now it's really about just, this works for me. We did it during the pandemic. We're going to keep it this way.
I totally agree with both of you. And, yes, some parents are homeschooling and some parents are sending their kids to charter schools. They see it as a better option as well. And this impacts a lot of kids in the public sector, because if there's less kids, there's less money for resources, there's less money for, intervention teachers and so forth. That definitely impacts schools. Now, the other thing that I found really interesting about that article, so they named every teacher that spoke, and they also listed the time of year that these teachers left. It wasn't just June. There were teachers that were leaving mid-year, the beginning of the year. So that's a real message that people are, especially educators, they're having a really, really hard time right now. And, once again, the pandemic showed us some different things, right? A lot of people right now are working from home. They're not commuting. They're not spending 2 hours to get to work. They have hybrid models. If we want to retain teachers, we have to become more fair. We have to give our teachers love and support. And we have to stop criticizing them for every little thing. Look at your data. Your data is not good enough. So is it only the teacher's fault that the data is not good enough? Where was that intervention for the kids that needed extra support? Where was the time to do a lesson that should be 30 minutes, but we're only given 10 minutes?
Excellent point. Yeah, excellent.
It is. Those are excellent points. And I want to let our viewers know that each of us posted a poll. I posted a poll on my LinkedIn page. Judy and Faith can speak to their polls. But the latest results from my poll, it had over 2,200 impressions, 58 votes. And this was the question I posed. Teachers are leaving the profession. What incentives might be offered to teachers so they continue teaching in our schools? 4 choices: money, smaller class sizes, eliminate high stakes testing, and focus on the basics. Came in first, 48% of the vote, money. 26% of the vote, smaller class sizes. And the third, focus on teaching the basics. And I will say that on my page, my LinkedIn page, I received more comments than I've ever received for anything I've posted, because people feel so strongly. One of the teachers that was interviewed for the Chalkbeat article also brought up that all of these other things are making their way into education since the pandemic. So we're talking about critical race theory. We're talking about gender issues, and teachers are having to submit lesson plans. Pre-pandemic, those things were not at the fore. of education. So I put in there focus on teaching the basics because we have such a literacy and numeracy crisis in our country that I think to be putting all kinds of other things in the social emotional learning, it really dilutes what we're able to do with reading, writing, and math.
Yeah, so interesting. My poll was in our little group on Facebook. And if
Ooh.
you haven't signed up, I hope you like us and join our group. It said that 35% of the people felt money was an issue. 54% felt smaller class sizes would help. Nobody voted for testing like you, Mary. Nobody felt the high stakes testing was a deal breaker for them. And 11% felt sticking to the basics would help. What about you, Judy?
So my poll on Twitter, same question. I thank Mary for starting this because I do think our viewers need a voice. We want to hear you. 55% said more money. No one, again, said state tests. 27% focus on the basics, 18% smaller class size. But I think in all our polls, there were some choices that weren't on there and some voices that said they would like a better life and work balance. Because let's be honest, teachers work, what, 7 hours a day? Then they have to go home, feed their family, and then go back to writing lessons with objectives and differentiation and all of that stuff. So there was that voice as well. Like, you know, other jobs, you go to work and then you come home, you kick back, put on football or The Bachelor, whatever you want. Bachelor in Paradise actually right now. But, you know, for teachers, you're grading 30 tests. You're trying to give those kids feedback. You're doing bulletin boards where you're writing feedback for those bulletin boards. And, you know, it's funny, I looked at job boards and education jobs. They don't pay very well at all a lot of times. And, you know, the cost of living in different parts of the world, you know, New York City, it's expensive to live here, right? And it's funny, you know which jobs I saw pay better than teaching? You ready for this one?
What?
And there's nothing wrong with these jobs. Nanny jobs get paid more than teachers. Bartenders, you know, they sometimes make more than teachers and get tips. And there's nothing wrong with those jobs, but we have to think about how we treat the educators because our kids are the future. And if our teachers aren't happy, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Well, I think that, you know, one thing that came up was behavior, children's behavior. So even though they enjoy teaching kids, they feel that it's so hard to manage, especially when the classes are quite large. How do you manage this? And what's interesting is, you know, you don't really get a lot of training in college about how to manage behaviors. And the other issue is many of those kids are rebelling because they can't read. Let's go back to our
Yes,
roots, you know,
yes,
the
bingo,
literacy view.
bingo.
100%.
Yeah, so if you think about behaviors, we really have to rethink how we teach kids to read. And this should be another red flag for administrators and say, hey, you know what? We really need to rethink what we're doing K to 2, because these are the kids who grow up, they're very angry, they know, they're very aware that they're falling behind.
Absolutely.
And then the teacher is abused in that classroom because that, you know, teacher is the one who's at the head of the room and takes the brunt of it. So, you know, we really have to look at this and start thinking about what's going on at the university level. All goes back to what teachers are learning. They're not learning proper behavior management skills. They're not learning how to teach reading well. And then they're thrown into a class where it's just not manageable for
But
them.
you know what? Let me also say, though, they're set up for failure. Because if you have one or two behavior problem students in your classroom and they're severe enough, they're going to try to take the whole class with them. So we need support staff also that are delivering reading instruction to kids that really need it. So I was in the classroom for 32 years, and I had some kids who had behavioral issues. And you are right, it's because they're lagging behind. But because I was teaching a class of 25 or more, I couldn't give them the individualized instruction. And then they couldn't qualify for an IEP because of a lot of different factors. But it's, I think right now too, teachers are talking about the social emotional learning. So this is going on. So teachers were taken out of the classroom and made coaches as SEL coaches, and they do this social emotional learning type of counseling and training for teachers, and they're counseling kids, but they haven't been trained for that. So one of the women quoted in this Chalkbeat article, Jessica from Denver, said, I have over a decade of teaching experience and professional learning around reading, early literacy, and math, but not nearly enough to act as a social worker or counselor for children. And I have to be honest, if my sons were in a school and, another teacher was delivering, social emotional lessons, and they haven't really been trained in this arena or certified, I think we really need to be careful there.
Well, basically it's making the teacher do a million jobs, right? You're this, you're that, you're this, you're that. And then sometimes, IEPs, kids don't get them when they might really need them. The system always says, let's wait, let's watch, let's collect more data. And I get that. But some kids are in those classrooms that really need additional support. And the system shouldn't be created in a way that you only get that additional support if you have an IEP. There has to be a real good RTI system in place so that all of our kids get additional support if they need it. Because a teacher is only one person. There's a lot of kids in those classes that need extra help. They're crying for help. But guess what? If we have a teacher shortage, there won't be enough teachers to help our kids. And if the instruction is not evidence-based, those kids are suffering. They're suffering if they're being taught in a way that's not equitable. And, the article mentioned something about inequity. It mentioned that, a lot of those schools look very different depending on the zip code of where you teach. You go to the Upper West Side, you might have a building that has nicer books. One of the people in the article mentioned nicer staff, nicer buildings, maybe more support, maybe a stronger PTA that's doing fundraising every day. We have to level the playing field. Every child nationwide deserves an equitable, wonderful education. And guess what? It's not happening right now.
Well, I could tell you that, you mentioned that kids are not getting services. Often, many of the people who are supposed to deliver services are pulled to cover classes.
Yes, bingo.
So, look, I was one of them, and that drove me crazy. So to me, that was such a lack of respect of what I had to do,
Oh
that
my God,
I'm,
yes.
babysitting these kids, and I get it. They needed somebody to do it, but it would always inevitably be the people who had to deliver services, whether
1,000%
specialist, resource room teacher. We were always being pulled. So those kids were not getting what they needed according to the IEP or whatever they were supposed to get at the time. And you mentioned something also about zip code. That's exactly right. So more teachers in high poverty areas are leaving the system. And they tend to be Black and Latino teachers who are leaving even more than white teachers. And, think about that the kids who need Black and Latino role models in the classroom, they chose this field and then they're leaving. They don't feel supported either. So it's just a big mess all around.
You know what? It strikes me, Judy and Faith, that there is a feeder system being created as a result of this dysfunction. The feeder system are the people who are picking up the pieces, like the three of us, in our private tutoring practices, because the public and private schools are not getting the job done. So people with money can get that individualized instruction for their kids, as we've talked about before. This is a real case story. 5 teachers left a building in Texas, all 5. They were just done with public education. They have opened up their own learning center. They have math. They have, dyslexia certified people. They have reading. These 5 women have formed their own company, and they will be delivering instruction, and they even go into schools. But they thought, we can't operate anymore within this rigid skeletal system, this bureaucracy of education. And so what's happening, the failings of education, it's creating businesses and business opportunities, even for people like us. So parents are desperate. I guess, and I left the classroom, my friends are still teaching, my closest friends. Why did I leave? Well, as I said before, the veteran teachers in my district were sounding the alarm that the Lucy Calkins workshop model was not working. We had dozens and dozens of students not learning to read and write. And yes, I left the classroom 3 years ago. But guess what? Lucy Calkins is still being used. She has repackaged her materials, if you want to call them that, and people are still signing up for her workshops, etc. But what she did was really toxic, because she instructed, in my opinion, all the people who went to New York City to her workshops. They were told, make the teachers read the script from the book. They have to be held in high fidelity. And so when we questioned veteran teachers like myself, we were told, no, we were wrong. We were punished. A group of us had to file a formal complaint against the person in our district. So it was very, very difficult. So this is why I bring it up. Another person in the Chalkbeat article says, you really don't have as much power as you're told that you do. There are people above me that are making rules for the population that they're vastly out of touch with. And that's exactly, one of the respondents for my LinkedIn poll said, hey, too many meetings, and we need a voice. When we're saying we're the frontline practitioners, there is something wrong. This works for 60%, but we're losing 40. Then you need to pay attention.
I agree with that.
I could tell you, when I wrote my book, Failing Students or Failing Schools, I discussed all these issues, but I waited until after I was not in the school system when I wrote my book. But it's interesting. I used to keep a diary, a journal, and I actually collected all my journal entries, and that was the basis of my book.
Oh, interesting.
All my experiences, because it was my way of dealing with it. It was my therapy. To
Your
be
coping
honest,
mechanism.
that was my coping mechanism, to write. So I would come home and I would write. In the morning, I would wake up and I would write my thoughts about things. And then when I was going back over this, I said, this is a book. And I'm saying this because as a teacher, going through the stress of some of the things that I would see, like Mary mentioned, having to go along with reading programs that were damaging. And you knew there was something that was wrong here. It was getting me sick, honestly, just getting me sick to watch and not really have a voice, not really have a say. And many teachers knew that this was not the right way to do things. They saw that the kids were not learning to read the way they should. And yet, you know, your hands are tied. Your hands are tied. So we need to start really listening and looking and trying to make those changes, because we're going to be losing lots more people. It said, I think, an estimate, I don't know if it was in this article or something else I saw, it's all blending together. Think about half the teachers are looking to leave the profession.
Well,
they actually
of course,
will, but about half of them are saying.
Faith, I agree with you. And, you know, I see the younger generation right now. A lot of them just stay in a job for 1 year, then they want more money, and then they jump again. And guess what? I know a lot of young people, and guess what? Their salary looks a hell of a lot better than mine.
Amen.
For me, it took 25 years to finally make a salary that even looked slightly normal. These
Bingo.
young millennials, they're getting 150,000, 200,000. They're working from home in their pajamas.
Exactly.
Well, I could tell you, having children at that age, you know, I have a 30-year-old and a 27-year-old.
Wow.
It's not so easy for them, because they might, some of them, not all of them, some of them might be making those salaries, but they're working their butts off. I mean, I could tell you that you don't see everything. It looks so rosy, but my son, I could tell you, his hours are crazy.
Yeah, that's probably true.
And working really very long hours. So I don't want to give the impression that it's such an easy transition. It's not.
But you know what, Judy, you bring up a really important point, because my dear friend realized that she is making, at 37 years of teaching, only $3,000 more dollars than somebody who is at 11 or 12 years teaching. So that's insane. And right, longevity.
Right, and life became more expensive. You know,
But,
inflation is high. Grocery shopping costs more money. You know, and yes, you're right, Mary. Teacher salaries, in the beginning, it goes up nicely, and then it just goes really, really, really slowly.
But you know what? I think this was an interesting thing from the article. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing teachers today? Abby from Brooklyn, New York says, the amount of labor involved, physically and mentally, spiritually, it is so intense. The amount of juggling required to get through a day is truly exhausting. This was the first time that I went on a spring break and didn't feel completely spent. Teachers must have more time to create curriculum that is thoughtful, freeing, and meaningful for students.
Well,
and
I still don't think teachers should be writing curriculum, though. I think
No.
teachers should be, yeah.
No, but she left in November of 21. And then this was the other reason, you know, this also hit a nerve with me. This person is Catherine from Queens, New York. It is what I call the second job. Teaching is really two jobs. There's the job of delivering instruction during the day, and the rest of the teaching, planning, grading, figuring out the mountains of data. During my last years, 17, 18, 19, data meetings all the time. We couldn't catch our breath. We were having to teach 25 kids, usher them to music or art or phys ed, and then go straight to a data meeting. And then
teachers, you know what they were doing? Teachers were taking off from work to do their data reports. I'm not kidding. They would actually take off days because they knew they had data meetings, and they felt the crunch at the last minute and would take off days to do the data.
Catherine says that you leave the school building to go home to more work. And I know that there was a lot of resentment, and I know that there's resentment with some teachers and administrators too, because administrators are not working with the children.
When's the last time, let me just jump in. When's the last time anybody here saw an administrator modeling a lesson? Faith, did you ever see a lot of administrators modeling lessons?
No.
Mary?
And, you know,
I had one in the last, I had one person in the last 10 years of my career.
All right, at least you got one.
Yeah.
But,
that-
but as far as you brought it up earlier, one of you brought it up about there's no positive feedback either. I mean,
No positive
I
feedback.
was writing grants in the summer. So I was writing all these grants to make sure that this classroom was engaging and alive and getting all these materials. And it was, they liked it. It was written up in the newspapers, but I wasn't like, this is really great. I never
Nope.
felt that it was all this extra work I was doing was appreciated, but it was appreciated by parents and the students.
And that's where
Well,
I
have
also
to
got
say,
the most
I had
feedback.
a principal when I first started teaching in Brooklyn, a real old timer, never forget, Mr. Rahinsky. And Mr. Rahinsky used to write handwritten notes thanking you.
Oh, that
and
makes a
put
big
it in your
difference.
mailbox. And he used to walk around with a little pad in
That's
his
awesome.
jacket. And every time he noticed something positive, he would write it down and then he would put a little note in your box. Thank you at the time, Miss Yaverbaum, for those lovely papers. Thank you for putting on that wonderful performance. And honestly, I don't know if it was because I was a kid, but it made my day. It was, I felt really good about that. I was in my early 20s and just getting those little notes in my box did help. It did make me feel very good. And I don't think that ever happened since.
Yeah, that's a really good point. One assistant principal once left a note on my desk, and you know what? That happened like maybe 15 years ago, and you don't forget that positivity.
No.
And it's amazing, as teachers, we're always supposed to give kids positive feedback, positive reinforcement. Who's giving the teachers that positive reinforcement? Look at the rating systems. Your rating is attached to how the kids are doing in the class. Half the time, the kids aren't getting the proper level of support. And then you're labeled highly effective, which not that many people get, ineffective, developing. We're labeling our teachers. It doesn't feel good. It terrifies a lot of people to be labeled like that.
But yet we do it to kids all the time.
Exactly, Faith. We label them with the letters on the reading boxes. You're reading at level E. You can only read from the level E.
Yeah, labels hurt.
Labels hurt. I love that.
And we really have to think, is this helping anybody? Is it helping the teachers? Is it helping the children? And just one other point I want to bring up, during the pandemic, many people would look to the internet to get some help to work with their kids. That's how I met Trey Hadrick, Mr. Lit. And he was looking for help for his son. And he and I discussed this, and I tutored his son. And we never would have met without the pandemic happening and without the internet and without transitioning. So I really do think we should be looking at this more globally and seeing solutions that can happen globally, that it doesn't have to all occur within the walls of a building anymore. The pandemic did change that, and that actually could be a positive. Mary, you're not on.
This is a really good segue then. What are the solutions? So let's talk about the positive things that can be done. Some of our viewers online left their remarks. What are your thoughts?
I have one thought, and I think about this often, and I don't see it too much. So teachers are writing sometimes like a million lesson plans. They're writing a math lesson plan. They're writing a reading lesson plan. They're writing a social emotional lesson plan. They're writing science lesson plans. Why don't we think about maybe departmentalizing even younger kids? So picture you have one literacy specialist, one teacher is a literacy specialist. She writes those, or she or he writes that lesson plan. And then her colleague might be writing the math. Let the experts teach. So for instance, you don't even have to have little kids moving a room. The only thing that moves is the teacher. So the teacher could teach literacy to one class, And that teacher might be really passionate about literacy. And then next, the math teacher comes in and they switch rooms. I think that might be a solution because nobody wants to plan 15 lesson plans at night. It's really, really hard. And this way it lets people that are passionate in a certain content area, the kids win because maybe they get an expert in that room. I don't know, just a thought.
I did that actually in Brooklyn.
Did you really?
Yeah, I was teaching 5th grade at the time. And it was just for the older kids. We didn't do it for
Yeah, that's what I always see for the older kids, but I think it's an interesting model to think about for younger kids too.
There's some research that says that it's kind of better to keep kids with that one person just
Really?
to kind of feel, yep, you know, in terms of the emotional part, feeling that connection with one teacher. But I don't know. I think it certainly has value. What we did when I was a kid, we used to track kids, and you know, the teachers would take the top kids, you know, one
Yes, and I think they never really
one
told
kid-
us.
one
You're
teacher
right.
had the bottom group, and that of course we know is very damaging.
Detrimental.
But, you know,
and I
yeah.
remember that as a kid growing up
Right.
in the 80s, I'd look, all the smart kids are in that class.
Yeah.
Am I in the medium class? I think I'm in the middle.
Well,
But there's one
imagine
smart kid in my
being that bottom class. So, you know, it's really, you know, there's a lot of pluses and minuses, of course, for the teacher who just has to teach that one lesson where the group is homogenous or, you know, kind of, you know, on one level. It works.
Yeah, another solution could be, okay, so I saw a lot of teachers writing science lessons, right? Maybe you should have if science is that important in your building, have a science cluster that comes in to help the kids, you know?
That too.
What?
In Brooklyn, we had that too. We had I'm not kidding you. We
But
had
see,
a
that's the
science
problem.
teacher.
But that's the problem. Some schools have that, some schools don't. So, you know, where's the equity?
Okay, so you know, some of the people that commented on my LinkedIn page noted work-life balance.
Yes.
Teachers do not have a work-life balance. And Faith, you and Judy, you brought it up before. Since the pandemic, we know that teachers can do some online teaching. All three of us do, you know, do work. Faith and I do work exclusively online. So it's the school systems in our state boards of education, we need to think about a hybrid model for teachers, maybe longer school days and, you know, the 4-day-a-week model. I don't know, but the work-life balance is a big deal. Teaching the basics. I left in 2019, but I am shocked by how much more teachers have today than I did 3.5 years ago. And because of the social emotional learning and also bringing up all of, you know, gender and all of that, especially in K-3, it's my opinion, it should be kept out. So let's focus on the basics. Let's get reading and writing and math done, especially K-5. Praise, we brought up earlier, praise. There was, you said early in my career, it reminded me of a guy named Dick Dutro, and he was an administrator and probably the best administrator I've ever had, but it was early in my career. He would come in and sit in on lessons, but I didn't feel threatened. He would always jot a note, put it in the mailbox. He was a champion of growing and cultivating teachers. It wasn't about gotcha moments.
Right.
That was huge. And so many of us carry Dick Dutro in our hearts today. The support. When you have children who are having behavioral issues, some due to emotion or academics, we have support people to offer them intense instruction, remediation, counseling, and what they need, because it is disruptive. You know, somebody had commented, behavior is a big deal in many of America's classrooms. And, you know, Walt Disney, he had a philosophy. His top executives were not to be in the office. He wanted those top executives out in the theme parks. He wanted them out intermingling with people and getting feedback. Administrators need to be out of the office. Also, people who are doing educational research, you need to also be in the schools and working, like do a month or 6 weeks in the schools to see what it's like on the front lines.
That's an excellent point.
Yeah.
My last point is what also was killing me, and one of the commenters noted, fewer meetings. The data meetings absolutely drove me up a wall. And also the PD was just very boring pap. It was just like regurgitating the same thing over and over again. So teachers have to be engaged and enlivened and catalysts for learning, but they have to feel that from within in order to emanate. But we have to do a better job. There are a lot of people running the schools as administrators that really need to get jazzed up and do a better job, because I think we're going to have a huge ripple effect in this country with teachers leaving.
Well, I'm going to give a shout out to the district I'm working with now.
Woohoo!
Yeah, woohoo, Lynbrook School District, because I think they did it right. And I could tell you that Dr. Jerry Balekis, the head of curriculum and instruction, he did not just decide by himself, oh, we're going to take, tier 1 and toss it and make a decision by himself. He brought in the superintendent, he brought in principals, he brought in a team of teachers. I met with them a few times before I even did PD with them. There was buy-in, and he valued the teachers by also making sure that they were covered so they could do this type of learning during the school day. So teachers were covered with subs while they had the PD. And if they did anything afterwards, they were getting paid. And, that really shows that he, along with, the superintendent, Melissa Burak, that they really understood what it is to go and have to take on this new learning and still have a class and have all the other responsibilities. So there are administrators out there who do value their teachers, who do it right, who bring teachers in, making sure there's buy-in, and not just do a one and done PD, where there is consistent support. I mean, I'm working with this district and we are doing it right. Kindergarten first, bringing it up to first grade, then second grade. I just worked with the SLPs. We're bringing it down to pre-K. We are covering all the angles so that there is a smooth transition along the way. So I agree with you. We really need to rethink what we give to teachers, how we do it, value what they say, respect them as people, respect their time, and compensate them for their new learning appropriately.
That's right.
One last thing that I want to say also, maybe schools should consider letting the teachers do the after school PD from home. Let them go home and then they could get on a computer maybe and do some of the PD sometimes.
No, you know what? Because you mentioned at the beginning of the show that, most careers you go home and you kick back and you can watch the Bachelor or whatever. Teachers do not want to do that outside of the school day.
I don't know. I heard some teachers actually, if you get out a little earlier, because like in some schools, they make you stay till 4 or 5 o'clock. That's hard. That's hard. Right. Or maybe flexible start times, flexible end times. I don't know. Teachers need a little bit of support. I know a lot of my teachers struggled with having to stay up late at work because, it affects school pickup, school drop off. I'm just putting it out there, not as something that must happen. My general point is that I think people need to be a little bit creative, hear the voices of their teachers. And also another thing, why during so many PDs is it the same PD for everybody? Where is teachers' voice about what they want to learn, and where is the support to learn what they need? Why is it always, oh, today we're doing SEL, tomorrow we're doing this, tomorrow schools say, yeah, we're going to differentiate the PD this year. It's going to be different. I haven't seen it be a lot different. It's the whole.
I agree with you.
Seeing the same old thing. But one thing I do want to add is data. For me, data is the key. And I know you mentioned that it's always a data meeting, and I get your point. However, I feel truly in my heart that data is at the core of helping our kids. And it is such an important piece that teachers need to look at it, because without data, it's always an opinion about what the kids need. You have to look at that data to, you know, for next steps.
Right, we do have to look at data. That is definitely not what I'm saying, but the plethora of meetings is really slogs a person down. I agree, Judy, that was probably also one of the biggest things with me. I felt like the PD, it was just, my friends and I, we have decades of teaching experience. We're in the same PD as somebody who's in the 1 to 5 year band of teaching.
But if you're looking to make a change throughout a district, everybody has to speak the same language. So I disagree with what you're saying. I think that if I'm an administrator and I am looking to make big changes, then everybody needs to understand what it is you're bringing in.
I agree.
And you have to speak the same language. You all have to understand that the program has to be delivered with fidelity. It can't be where someone gets it and someone doesn't.
Well, I guess that's right.
But wait, let me finish. But if you already have some basic knowledge in something, and if you have advanced knowledge in a particular area where you can show, I already know this, well then, obviously, we should start differentiating with those types of things.
You know what? I agree with you, Faith, but however, because I lived the Lucy Calkins teacher professional development, it has scarred me for life. Honestly,
it did not scar me for life.
It scarred me because of the toxicity where people were, yes, you have to follow the program with fidelity, but they weren't. It became like a Gestapo. It became a gotcha. Like, we will come and see this. You will be doing.
So is it the PD or is it the administrator?
Both.
See, I'm getting confused.
Both.
Yeah, but
when you raise
act like that, right? Like it's you're being punished if you don't follow this to the T, instead of having a conversation and saying, you know what? Maybe you didn't do the error correction at the time. Let me help you and show you how this could be done. Here's why you need to do it. So I think that, okay, I don't want to go with Lucy Calkins, but you
guys know how I feel about that. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
I'm saying that what you're saying is that, to me, is not that everybody's getting the same instruction. That's really about the administrator not knowing how to speak to teachers in a way that's respectful and to try to bring them along. I don't want to confuse.
But yeah, and you're absolutely right. But when teachers who have intense experience and certification like I do, and we're talking about a program that it's not okay, then our voice should be heard.
Absolutely, but that's something different from everybody getting the same PD. What you're saying is the PD that you were getting is damaging to kids. And, I don't know if that's about everybody getting the same PD, or that you had evidence that this might not be the best for kids, especially struggling readers. That's entirely different again. So, I think that we have to really look at this, that sometimes PD for a whole building or a whole district is necessary.
I agree with that.
Sometimes,
right. But not for every single one.
No.
Okay.
All
this
right.
is a wonderful discussion, and we need to correct things because teachers leaving the profession is really not okay for our society and for our children.
Yeah, and we want to hear from more of you. We want you guys to.
That we want to call BS on before we go, so that we could use our.
Before the BS, I want to shout out to all our teachers out there. I want to say thank you guys for how hard you're working and what you're doing to try to help children. And that's it.
Great.
And also, we want to hear your voices. This topic is not a topic that we just speak about now. We want to hear your voices. Post on Mary's LinkedIn, on our Twitter, on our Facebook page. We want to hear your voices, okay? We know that this topic is going to stir a lot of emotion. Here's your chance. We want to hear more from you.
Remember what the name of our group is, right? The Literacy View, Real Teachers Letting Loose. We want to hear from real teachers.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.